Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Best Practices Session 2. The season has been moving quite fast, and we have many different activities through this session. At this time, we'll have again a slightly modification in the growers discussion. Marcel Cole has been unable to attend with us. But anyway, we have very good speakers, topics to cover, and quite excited to be here today. Steve, please.
Well, I just want to welcome everyone back as well. It's exciting to be in another season here. Everything's growing fast. The weather's a little crazy the last few days, but that's par for the course for Nova Scotia. So our first speaker tonight is Jeff Wenzel. He's the Senior Ag Extension Coordinator here in Kentville region, I guess for all Western Nova Scotia. He's going to talk to us a little bit about what NSDA can do for him, the services they provide, and he's got a presentation on spreadsheet tool here we can work for some tracking of cost of production. So welcome, Jeff. It's nice to have you on board with best practices.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate the invitation. Appreciate the chance to talk tonight. And for those of you who don't know, we have, frontline extension throughout the province. We have 7 offices throughout the province. I am just in the Western region, and we have offices in Cornwallis, Kentville, and Lunenburg. In the eastern end of the provinces, those offices are in Bible Hill, Edgonish, and Sydney. So ag extension coordinators are in those offices, and those people are there for you. I guess the best way to describe us is we're generalists. We can help navigate pathfind. One of the things that we do a lot of pathfinding with people with are programs, navigating ours and sometimes navigating programs outside of the Department of Ag. So if you have questions on that line, usually between us and the business development officer staff in those regional offices, we're there, and we sort of want to put to you, what are your plans 6 months, 12 months out, and then we can start to help you navigate through some of those situations. So again, when we're done with the cost of production tool, I would encourage you that our frontline staff are, now that we're exiting or moving into the next level of COVID, are back out on farms and doing farm calls. So if you need to see somebody or have questions, Francisco is that viticulturalist specialist. We can help with the other types of stuff, and then our lab services are now back open. So we can send around and look in the blog for our contact information. We'll give you the office locations and all that for those of you that don't have that. So the reason why I'm on tonight, and I will share my screen, is we had started a little bit of work, I guess, a little while ago, or quite a while ago. I think everybody can now see my spreadsheet there. Through some of the work with Steve and the Grape Growers directors, we started to talk about cost of production. And I think that's on the tip of everybody's tongue right now, and looking at controlling costs and where we are and with the things that are going on. We wanted to try to, without doing a full-blown cost of production, start to look at some of the management tools that you might be able to use on your farm to help you cover looking at and costing. And we focused on labor. From the time we started this, Francisco has been involved, William Brook from the Kentville office, myself, and we've bounced ideas off some growers as well to try to come up with that. We are going to put in machinery and inputs as well. So we've broken up the categories, and you'll see on here, it gives you your laboring costs. Now we've calculated them on a per plant and a per hectare basis through that. So what we wanted to do is give producers relatively moderately easy ways to go through and put in where the green, you put in your area, your spacings. We'll end up getting the densities for you and then your yields, so we can do some of the calculations. As we go through vine management, there are a number of tasks there that you can use to put in your hours. When you put in your hours and your hourly rates, some of those calculations will be done so that you can see your cost on your farm per hour, per hectare, per plant. We go through land management, pest and fertility, and this will be the one that we're probably going to want to add more in about tractor machinery and some in land management as well, and those products as well, and some of the other canopy management and harvest. So tracking your labor throughout, and again, not full-blown cost of production, but at least a kind of a tool to start tracking this information. So then you come back and you get your summary, gives you your vines, total vines, pints per hectare, kilograms per plant, sort of your revenue. Again, quick calculations that are going to see where you're trending, and then over time you can do that. Part of the work that we haven't got done yet is to sort of try to give you some information about industry standards. So we're at this stage with this tool. What I'm probably looking for is any grower that would like to help or want to try to use it or help us make it better that might meet your needs. Going from full-blown enterprise accounting versus trying to track some of these things, to track and know where your labor is and some of these costs, we would love to do that. So at the end of this, my phone number and contact information will put in the blog, and we'll go from there. So a really quick overview. The other thing that I would offer is that if anybody wants to sit down with me, I would love to talk about this more, to try to give you tools that are going to help you put in enough information to give you enough data to give you useful information back. So that's sort of where we're heading with this. And at some point would love to have some feedback. And Francisco has helped us along with this. And again, Will Brook from policy has also helped us out a little bit. And you can see there, given those hours, you can relate it back to where you are on your farm of hours per acre, minutes per plant. And that summary will track that. And again, tracking it over time and understanding where that's going and where your labor is. So that's just a quick overview for it. Again, I would invite that anybody has any questions, comments, put it in the chat box or the Q&A section, and I'd be happy to answer that.
Thank you, Jeff, to present to us the cost of production tool. It's definitely a help to growers to be able to track all the cost and how to help to oversee where they are spending more money and to calculate the revenue. So as Jeff already said, if you have any questions, I would like to encourage you to write on the Q&A feature on the bottom of your screen. So while I'm waiting for some questions, Jeff, I would like to ask you, because you already started explaining a little bit about the different areas throughout the province and who is working. So could you repeat that, or if you have something graphic to show us, please?
I will have to share my screen again. Yes, and we will make this available. This is a little bit of an older version map, but it will give you the idea. And it does have a few people on here that are, Carrie Brown in the Western Cornwallis end is now off on maternity leave. We welcome a new little young man to the agricultural world that was born on May 24th. You can see the BDOs are in the county offices as well. In this end of in the valley, Colin Hurdle is the agricultural extension coordinator. Rachel Brighton is the business development officer, and then I get to be, as you so pointed out, senior ag extension coordinator. And for those people from back in the 90s, I guess we used to be called ag reps, and that's really the name that resonates for me from in that time. So we're trying to get our staff to be that general ag rep person in your area, and we have cell phones, we have vehicles, and we can meet you at the farm. Ross is over in Lunenburg, Ross McNeil, and we will be putting somebody in the Western office on maternity leave soon. And as you go up through, Daniel Murr, Rhonda McDougall, and Marina Gillis are the AECs throughout the Eastern region, and then business development officers are in Truro, Bible Hill, Edingonish, and Sydney offices as well. Terry McPherson, Jeff Hennessy, and Julia Lindsay. So there's a contingent of staff that will meet you where you are and help you go through the issues or problems or proposals or grant sorting through that stuff. We are more than happy to help you through that stuff in our roles.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Jeff.
Francisco, can I ask Jeff a question?
Absolutely.
And Jeff, I think you're able now to help out with getting soil samples up to Truro from the central region here.
Yeah, we are now taking the Kentville. We would ask you if you're going to bring anything to the Kentville office just to give Nicole 679-6021, and we can put that in the weekly email again to book an appointment. The federal doors are still closed, and that's to be by appointment. So if you're dropping now tissue as well, if that's going to any of our lab services in Truro, yeah, we are doing that as well. So if anybody needs supplies, we keep those in our vehicle or can make arrangements to get them to you. Soil boxes, water bottles, all that stuff is available in the county offices. And like I said, again, what I will do is make our contact cell phones available to your industry through the Grape Frog or through the Grape Growers Next newsletter. And we look forward to connecting with you and seeing how we can help you out.
That's great. That's big help getting those tissue samples and soil samples up there a little easier. So that's great. Thanks, Jeff.
Jeff, if you can add later in the chat the information, please, the phone number so people can know where to call will be great. I have two questions for you, Jeff, right now. Okay, so first question is, will this budget Excel be made available?
At any point in time. Again, it's in development mode, so I have no guarantee. Like we've gone through, made the formula. So really right now is we're looking for anybody who wants to take it, beat it up, play with it, and make suggestions. We can definitely, we'll make that available. So again, I can send a link, or again, give you my email and you can contact me directly, or we can send it out however best meets the needs of your growers. Again, I'll put my contact information in the chat and my cell phone, and probably that's the easiest way right now is just connect and we'll start emailing it out. I do have to make sure version control and all that fun stuff to make sure we get the latest one. And I'd like to work on some of that stuff, but and again, Steve had talked about machinery. We might want to try to flip that in, but I might want to give it to some people to do while we're doing that as well, to get their feel of how part of this was user feel and part of it's useful information to make decisions off of or track. But I see the next question too is how much time. If this is something, if we can get valuable information by working with a grower that'll make it better for everybody, we can offer time. Like we do have other roles, but we definitely would look to work with somebody that would be able to give us, make it better, and then make it available for other people. So however much time it takes. So looking for interested cooperators that will help us make the tools better for everybody.
Great. Thank you very much, Jeff, for your time, for the explanation, and to provide all this information. It's always good to know where is NSDA, how we can reach them. Plus what Steve asked, okay, it's the biggest advantage now about the soil and tissue analysis, because it's time of the year, plus tissue analysis will be sooner rather than later.
And one last thing too is that we do a weekly update of sort of things that are happening out of we summarize some of the other things like pesticide points and things like that. So if any of your members aren't on that, again, I'll give you my email in the chat, and I'd encourage you to get on that as well, because we sort of give updates on program releases and things like that, because things like soil and water, the first call is going to happen here very, very shortly. The deadline is June 15th. So if anybody who's looking to do any of that soil and water, they should need to talk to us sort of right now.
Perfect.
So I'll put that in the chat, and thank you for inviting me, and look forward to working with your industry more.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Jeff, for your time. So now we are changing topic, but not too much of name. So I would like to welcome Jeff Franklin. Thanks to him, we are able to see every week a very nice graph and table with temperatures and how evolves the season. So I would like to say on behalf of everybody, Jeff, thank you very much for this nice contribution. So here we go with the update.
And thanks again for having me. I always like a good chance to talk about something I'm passionate about. Let me get my screen set up here. Okay, can you see my presentation there now?
Not yet.
Not yet. Let's try this. Still nothing.
No, you were sharing the screen, but now you stop.
Okay, is that? My computer is running quite slow tonight, so. Okay, trying this one more time.
No problem.
Are we there?
Not yet. So please work on me while I can give some information.
Sure.
So if somebody has any question throughout Jeff's presentation or the section on the Q&A with Steve or in my part, I will invite you to write your questions in the Q&A feature. There we'll be able to read your questions and ask to the speakers and be able to have a discussion. Jeff, now we can see your presentation.
Okay, let me back up. Okay, here we are at the beginning. So thanks again for inviting me here. Most of this presentation is updated as of either yesterday or today. The photos are from today. And so I agree with Steve, certainly a lot of development in the last week or so. Things have really moved along. So if we look at temperatures, average daily temperatures are the black dots, and I've got them plotted here for all of 2022 from January on to yesterday. Looking at that temperature trend. Now this is the same graph that I showed you before, just updated with current data. And so there's been a lot of, since February, March, there's been a lot of above average temperatures. But what has characterized May has been cycling temperatures. And you can see that right in here. You can see times that were above, definitely times that were below, above and below. And overall, we are running above average in terms of temperature, but of course we're getting there by being well above or well below. The net effect is that we're above average and very close to where we were last year. And on that, I guess it's important to note, if you look at any of the models, any of the forecasts, what they're predicting is that there's still more cycling to come. And this is a problem right across the country. It's not just Atlantic Canada. We're having trouble establishing a stable jet stream that will give us our typical summer patterns and have them last. We're getting samples of them, and we're also getting samples of late spring weather. So this is going to continue on for a little bit. I'm not really sure how long, and no one's really making any estimations of when this will end. So I've thrown this slide in. I put this in last session as well to talk about the frost events. I thought I'd put it in again because it really shows the actual experience that we're having in terms of day-to-day weather. So what these are, the squiggly line is literally the hourly temperatures plotted since May 1st, right through till 6th of June. And so that's the black line, the hourly daily temperatures. And the dotted red line and the dotted blue line are the normal, what should be the normal high temperatures and the normal low temperatures. And that information comes from Environment Canada. It's what they call their seasonal normal highs or seasonal low temperatures. And as you can see, they slope upward slightly because over the span of time we're looking at, May 1st to June 6th, the season progresses and we expect the high temperatures to be higher now than they were in early May. But to me, what's kind of striking about this pattern, the way that the hourly temperatures intersect with these lines, is that, again, you see this constant cycling. We have times of more or less average temperature, but there's very few days that are average temperature. Most of them are either well above or well below. And that's the kind of experience that everybody's having. And it's causing certainly some concern and some if you would have said, well, we're a little bit below average, you would be forgiven. If you said we're a little bit above average, you'd be forgiven too, because it depends on which days you're considering. But I've also had on this this shaded box down here at the bottom, and this is what I'm calling the sort of frost zone. And even though we shouldn't still be talking about that in early June, we've had some brushes with this frost zone actually in the month of June, and that's territory that we don't like to be in, and I know it's caused some distress. So if you look back to early in May, we had some definite hard frost events. So we had 4 nights where we went down below 0, and a couple of those nights went well below 0. And again, those were hard frost for green tissue, for some green tissue, for vulnerable varieties. That would have been a killing frost, but fortunately for us, the grape industry buds had not broken at that point. And so we have bud break coming in around the 16th of May as we tracked it in our vineyard. Probably some places had a little earlier, some would have had it later. And that's for the very earliest varieties. So like some of the red hybrids and varieties like Frontenac, they would have broken that time period. And other varieties, vinifera, would have broken later. So once we get into that bud break time, we're a little bit more cautious, and we're paying more attention to, of course, frost predictions, because before the buds break, we probably have 2-3 degrees below 0 before we start to see any damage. But once buds break, we're not going to they're not going to be tolerant of temperatures much below 0, certainly for very long. So following that, we had a couple nights where at the Kentville Weather Station, and remember, all these temperatures are from the Kentville Weather Station, where we got down to around 4 degrees, 3.8, 3.9, 4 degrees. And we know if we get that temperature at the Kentville Weather Station, we've probably had 0 in other areas just in our local community. So we can have 4 degrees at the Kentville Weather Station in our vineyard, which is less than a kilometer away, can be 2 degrees cooler. And I definitely know on those 2 nights in the 3rd week of May, where there were people in our growing region that had temperatures at around 0. Now, fortunately, these were not, and you can tell by looking at those 2 events, these weren't very prolonged periods of cold temperature. They happened just before sunrise and dissipated very quickly, but they did provide some light patchy frost at ground level. And even since then, even in June, we've had a couple events where Environment Canada has put in frost warnings. And those they never materialize, or certainly we didn't see them materialize anywhere on site at the research station. And I've yet to talk to anybody who had a problem with those events. But of course, we are curious if anybody did have problems in June with even light patchy frost on the ground. If anybody's had that, they can let me know, drop me a line, put it in the chat here, or send me an email later. Just curious to see how this is playing out across the growing region. So just looking at the hard numbers on temperatures, looking from January through May, we have been above average, slightly above average, or in some months well above average, every month since January, with the exception of January. So March was probably the most pronounced. We were 2 degrees above average, but even April and May are around 1 degree above average. And so if you think back to the hourly temperatures that plot that I showed, we've gotten there because we've had more extremely high warm days than extremely cold days. But there has been very little what I would call average weather. So moving on from temperature, we're going to talk about heat units. Last month, we talked about base 5 heat units. We found base 5 useful because it helps us predict bud break. But once buds break, shoots start to develop, we use a base 10. When that just means that we don't consider temperatures having an impact on growth until they are above 10 degrees. That's a better proxy for grapevine development post bud break. So as you can see here, the dark red line the thick red line is 2022 data. The dashed black line is the mean. So we're well above the average, and we're back and forth crossing the 2021 degree data or line. So in 2021, we definitely had a warm year. It was a good year. Things started to move early. We got good growth early, and we are very similar to that that year in terms of heat units as well. And well above the 2019 year, which if you see is down here. This green line, that was 2019. That was the year when everything was super late, super wet, and we had a truncated growing season. So we're nowhere near that, and I think we're well away from that territory. So I show this this plot every session. This is total rainfall and rainfall equivalent. So it doesn't just consider rain that falls like we're seeing tonight. It also includes snowfall that we see all through the winter. So as you can see, the red line again is 2022. We're well above the average. In fact, we're ahead of almost every other year that I've included on this plot. But most of that comes from those events, middle of January to the middle of February, where we had some significant snowfall. That's what really pulled that line up to the top. And since then, the slope of that line has been decreasing relative to the average line, meaning that we're getting either average or slightly less than average precipitation in the growing season. So April, I think we actually were right on average, around 83 millimeters of rain, but May hasn't been that way at all. And just looking at May precipitation, we ended up with 38 millimeters of rain compared to the average of around 69, 70. So May got about half of the precipitation we'd normally get. However, I still have to say, just experientially from doing some planting, there still is moisture in the ground. You may have to dig down a little bit to find it, but we certainly aren't certainly things aren't desperate yet. And with the rainfall tonight, it looks like 15 to 20 millimeters. Hopefully that will top us up and get us closer to that average precipitation for the growing season. Because of course, the events that we had back in February aren't of a lot of help to us right now. I know that they do have an impact on soil moisture levels into the early parts of the growing season, but of course, fairly soon, once we get into warm weather, we lose that benefit. Looking at May precipitation across the province, most times when I show this this graphic, there's a trend. Either the coast is heavier than the interior, and that's not quite the case here. What we're seeing is spotty precipitation all through the province. We have Liverpool with an accumulation in May of 100 millimeters, right next door to Yarmouth with an accumulation of only 23. 23 is, of course, quite a bit less than the 70 millimeters that you would expect. We are kind of in a middle situation here in Kentville, around 38 millimeters, and then Halifax and Sydney much closer to the average. So there's no trend that I can distill from this. A lot of our showers are coming as patchy events and not widespread rain showers like we're seeing tonight. Tonight's rain event should be a benefit to everybody in the province. Looking at soil temperatures, again, the thick red line is 2022 data. We've been running ahead of average since the 15th of March or thereabouts. And that's likely because we lost our snow quite early this year. We lost our snow in early March, and with some warmer, dry weather, the ground started to pick up heat quite a bit faster, and that's brought up our soil temperatures. And again, this is an estimate of the 30 centimeter depth for soil temperatures, which is where we would consider the rooting zone for most grapes would be. Anyway, we've been above 10 degrees since the middle of May, first week of May, which is good news for growing grapes and good news for applying fertilizer to grapes, because we know that the root system of grapes needs to be around 10 degrees to be active, to be bringing in nutrients, bringing in lots of water, pushing the shoots. And of course, we've been there for a while in May, so very good shape there. Looking at phenology, I went out and took these pictures today. So the picture on the left is Lackady Blanc, the picture on the right is Marquette, both fairly early varieties. And both varieties are elongating rapidly. Flower clusters are starting to develop quite noticeably. And I would put those at about the EL 14 and 15 stage. The significance of that is, of course, when I went back and looked at last year's presentation that I did on the 10th, so just a day later than this, we were at essentially the same EL stage. So phenology is almost identical this year. Dirt was on the same date last year and about 7 days ahead of where we were in 2020. So one thing we have noticed in our vineyard, I'll park here just for a second to talk about this. So this is a picture of a New York muscat vine in our research vineyard. And I don't know if others others watching this are having a similar experience, but if you look at this first group of shoots, the tall ones, these are all shoots coming from primary buds. And you can kind of tell that because you can see the angle here with the cordon. It's, well, it wouldn't be 45 degrees, but it's not 90 degrees either. So it's coming out on a bit of an angle. These are big dominant shoots. They're the ones that break first. But if you look over here on the left side of the photo, you don't see those types of shoots. In fact, what you see are much shorter shoots that are coming up vertically. And these are shoots coming from secondary buds, and very likely they come from secondary buds because the primary buds would have been killed in that January 20th event, which in our vineyard went down to minus 25.2. So even though, you know, New York Muscat's a reasonably hardy variety, there's still damage that we see and that we're starting to notice. And still, even if you look at that, so counting for those canes, there are still a lot of spaces on this cordon where no buds are broken. And it's hard to say at this point whether these will fill in or not. But certainly there is some signs of winter damage. It's something you can walk around your vineyard and look at. The first thing you'll notice is discrepancy in shoot size, where you have shoots that some shoots that are twice as long as others. Normally you wouldn't see that. Normally that's uncommon to see that balance or that lack of balance across the both cordons in your vineyard. And of course, then if you look at the angle that the shoot makes with the cordon, you get another indication whether or not it's a secondary or tertiary shoot. So just something else of interest to look for in your vineyards. We know that there was damage sustained throughout the growing area on January 20th. We had some estimates because of our bud hardiness work of where some of those sites were, but we suspect there are many more that are probably just realizing, looking at their vines, that they have this kind of profile, that they probably sustained some winter damage as well. So looking ahead, long-term forecast from Environment and Climate Change Canada for June, July, August. So the prediction has been for more or less an average summer. That was the prediction made all through the winter and early spring. But as of June 1st, the new forecast, we are one of the exclusive regions in the country where we expect to see higher than average temperatures. And if that's not clear to you, I'll just point that out. So this is Nova Scotia in here, where it intersects with the red and the orange. Those are the areas of highest probability of above average temperatures. And you can see there's not a lot of areas. In fact, I don't think there are any other areas except for maybe around Lake Superior, where there's such a high probability of above average temperatures in the summer. So we are definitely in a beneficial position there. On the downside of that, the precipitation forecast would also predict we're going to have higher than average precipitation and likely from tropical moisture. So the duration of this forecast is June, July, August. They put one out every month. It just sort of carries forward. Be curious to see on July 1st if this prediction holds. That we're going to see above average temperatures. I'd say we have so far have seen those, but of course they've been alongside of cooler than average temperatures as well. So I guess to a certain degree this has already started to come true, but we'll just see how this plays out for the summer. Anyway, it could be, other than the moisture, a very good year for vine development and for maturing fruit. Of course, the excessive moisture can be problematic from a disease point of view, and so we'll be watching that now. I'm already taking that into consideration as I plan my spray program for the year. It's likely going to be another year of fighting some downy mildew, so I'm trying to keep an eye on what products I can roll out down the road using the softer products that I can use now that don't have such restrictions on how many times it can be used. So something to consider. And so I'd like to thank you and a list of our sponsors here and affiliated research agencies that we work with. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff, for the presentation, for all the data, all the phenology information. It's quite interesting. I had one question already. I think you already mentioned a little bit about it, but I will tell you so you can answer. In terms of calendar days and plant development, are we about normal for this time of year, or are we slightly ahead by a few days, or are we slightly behind by a few days?
I would say we're slightly ahead by a few days. We are very close to where we were in 2021, which is very close to where we were in 2017, and where we actually started off to be in 2018 before the freeze event wiped that out. And those were all considered above average years. One of the problems of making this estimate is that we don't have 25 years of data. I mean, I know we've been growing grapes here for 25 years, but with emphasis on certain varieties, we don't really have 25 years of solid phenology data that I can point to. But I would say certainly looking over the last 10 years, yes, we are maybe 3-4 days ahead of average.
I would like to complement that at Perenia, we did a study of the RAG with the different dates, but it's already published that paper in the Grape Blog. And yes, Jeff, it's right. We don't have enough information for the last 20-25 years. However, in that paper, we have the dates of 2017. So if I start to compare with 17 or, again, as Jeff mentioned, 2021, we're almost there. So for this couple of years, it's fine. But if we compare historically data, we are ahead of time. So I have a question, please. I invite you, if you have questions, remember to write in the Q&A. Did you run your wind machine this year? Any impact?
So we have, because whenever there's a frost risk or any time that we think that the temperature is going to dip below 4 degrees, we arm the fan and set it up to go off in the event that temperatures go below 4. And the reason that we choose 4 degrees is that if it is going to make it all the way down to 0, we need to have a lot of time. The fan has to work for quite a few hours before it will begin to disrupt that inversion event. And so 4 times five or six times we've armed it, 4 times it has actually gone off. But in none of those times have we actually had any sort of frost damage at ground level. So yes, we've used it. Yes, the fan has operated, but in all those cases, we weren't destined to make it down to 0 anyway. Now, we had the harder frost earlier in May. We did not bother to arm the fan at that time simply because the tissue wasn't vulnerable. So we didn't bother to put it up until we got very close to bud break or slightly after bud break. So essentially those 4 events that I showed you in the plot there, where we either had a light patchy frost or potential frost, those were the 4 nights where the fan went off. We have temperature loggers spread through the vineyard, and I haven't been able to look at the data, haven't had time to look at the data yet this year to see if the fan made any impact in bringing up the temperature in the vineyard. But we certainly will be looking at that data, and I can probably speak to that at another time.
Thank you very much, Jeff, for the presentation, all the information, the contribution to the Grape Blog, and to answer all these questions.
That's great, Jeff. I mean, I wish we had longer sessions so you could talk longer with the weather. That's the only thing that would be better about it.
And you know I would do it.
Well, thanks very much. Our next presenter is going to be Francisco. He's going to get us up to date on all the current tasks in the vineyard. So go ahead, Francisco. Thanks very much. Yep, and your presentation's up.
Thank you very much, Steve. Well, I will not be talking about a lot of the activities, but more than a couple. So good evening, everyone. My name is Francisco Diaz. If you don't know me, I'm the viticulture specialist at Perenia. And today I want to talk about some vineyard activities. Okay, so for today, I will not be repeating like the amazing presentation that already Jeff Franklin did, but I will give a couple of highlights. So I will be tackling a little bit the question asked before about scouting the vineyard. This is a question very often that many people is asking on how to proceed. So we'll be talking about how and where to look. And activities, I will focus in a couple of activities that they are happening right now and something that will happen in the future. Right now, a lot is shoot thinning and tucking. And I will mention a little bit about tissue sampling because bloom will happen fast and will not be unable to have a best practice sessions. So I would like to give you heads up, even though I will be publishing on the Create blog some information about it. And in the fourth point, we have the literature available, which already was published last year, but I will be adding that on the chat. And finally, we'll finish with the growers discussion. So, brief highlights. So, as already Jeff mentioned, Budbirds started in a range of dates. I wrote approximately on May 17. When we start to compare this with 2021, it was that year on May 14, and in 2020 on May 24. So you can see the variation of every year and how this can impact to other phenological stages. The weather conditions, they have been favorable for plant growth. So we had good temperature accumulation and moisture for grapevines. It's true what said Jeff, precipitations or May was quite dry, but even though in that condition, the soil throughout the soil profile has been positive and good in a good amount for grapevines. The shoot thinning and tucking, it's already work in progress in some places. And as you will know better than me, weeds are growing fast as well. So bloom may start similar to last year if we continue with the same conditions. Not the same, but similar. So in 2021, bloom started approximately on June 20 in the warmest locations with the earliest varieties, and these ones can be Frontenac or Baco Noir. So if you keep track of your phenology in your property, that will be very good, as some of these, if we continue in the same condition, it can repeat. So scouting the vineyard. How? Well, first we have to identify the growth stage, the variety, and the area in our vineyard. Because different varieties, they have different disease susceptibility. So we have to identify in which area of the vineyard and with which symptoms are there. So this is something that everybody has to do in their own properties, track the day and the weather conditions, see and evaluate which kind of damage they have on the vine, take a description of the week, and try to do this 1 to 2 times per week. I will recommend minimum 2 times per week. And in that spots where you think or you have seen in previous years the disease. So where to look? Well, again, I will repeat the priority on the most susceptible varieties. So if you have vinifera varieties, I will encourage you to start there. Areas with less airflow and wet spots. So attention to wind directions and depressions through the vineyard. Why? Because if you have an area, some diseases, and the wind is going in the direction to the rest of the vineyard, you can spread easily the disease, especially if you have varieties more susceptible. Keep notes of the areas with your observations, my apologies, and check different parts of the vine. So for example, in this photo, you can see that we're checking on the top of the leaf and also behind the leaves. Why? Because these diseases, they can show in different ways. So a couple of considerations, and to keep in mind, I will let you know part of the literature where you can find more information. But on the left, on the top, you have the photo of powdery mildew, and on the bottom, downy mildew. While on the right, you have a photo of Irinium mite. And I would like to differentiate Irinium mites with Phylloxera because how they are the galls on the lips. In Irinium mites, the galls are going on the top of the lips. Meanwhile, in Phylloxera, they are going on the bottom. Okay, that only a couple of considerations. So I will be mentioned. I'm providing more data or tools to distinguish in the other part of the presentation. So activities, what is happening right now? And as you can see in your photo, we have 2 shoots, and we'll be eliminating one of them because the idea is to do shoot thinning. So this is the process of removing removing small shoots, secondary buds, and shoots from the trunk. So what we're doing with this, we diminish the competition of energy, nutrients, and water. But at the same time, we will be improving the airflow in the canopy, which can facilitate after the management of fungal disease, and especially complement with other activities like leaf thinning. Something to consider is how was bud break and how much production is estimated, because the idea is to have a balance in your plant and not just take out as much as you can. Just estimate on how it can be done. So shoot thinning, and here I will show you, this is Chardonnay, and as you can see, you have different shoots through this double cane Chardonnay, and it looks a little crowded. So what we have to do, we need some shoot thinning. So what we do, we start to choose which ones are bad located, or if they keep the criteria of the vineyard manager or owner. So it gives enough distance between shoots so to avoid overcrowd, and eliminates from the trunk in a way that you don't diminish that competition of nutrients, but at the same time, you allow to have a balance in the plant, thinking in the for the season and then the coming one. So here I wanted to show you, now it's a single cane. Again, as you can see on the base, a lot of shoots, suckers, and more than a couple throughout the single cane. So again, this is a young vine, but anyway, you have to do shoot thinning. And in this photo, you can see how we're eliminating all on the bottom, leaving a couple that they are expected for the next season and for this one, and leave it enough space through the vine, depending the goals expected for this vineyard at the beginning. Okay, so we are searching to have some balance in the plants from the beginning. Tanking. Well, tanking, as you know, it's when you start to accommodate the vines between the wires, and it will be depending variety priority. So first, the early varieties. Try to keep that because some varieties will be easier than others to tank. For example, like a V Blanc goes quite erect, and that can be quite easy, but others, it can lay down, which will require more attention. So what we'll be doing, getting with tanking, well, it's a complement of shoot thinning. So this will improve spray applications, as we'll have a wall of leaves, we'll have a better canopy aeration, we'll have a fruit area in good conditions. So all these activities complemented the shoot thinning and the tanking, and later on the leaf thinning, it will help you to grow a better fruit and without over applying sprays. So tissue sampling, we already mentioned the phenology has been moving quite fast, and I have my doubts, or I'm suspicious that before our next session, we'll have already a bloom. And for tissue sampling, we have 2 times to collect. One is at bloom, and the other is at veraison. So it's important to keep an eye on these stages and choose the varieties and areas. Remember, not everything will bloom at the same time, so give priorities to the varieties that they bloom early. For example, Frontenac, Baco Noir, or Lucie Coulman will be early bloom, and it will be a good time for a tissue sample to tune and tweak a little bit your nutrient management. So how we do? Well, we have to take a tissue sample of leaf and the leaf, and you can take the blade and the petal separately. Okay, so you will have in that way in the vineyard and put it in a different paper bag. I don't want to talk a lot about it or just mention, because this will be happening I suppose maybe June 2022 will start the first varieties starting. And literature available. Well, we already did a publication and mentioned last year. We have to check if you want to check different diseases, the identification guide to the major diseases of grapes is a very nice tool. If you want to see insects, just to compare, for example, uranium mite or phylloxera, we have the guide to the key arthropods of vineyards of Eastern Canada. And also, this year, and we published already a couple of weeks ago on the grape blog, we have the grape production guide where you can see a lot of these activities for canopy management or nutrient management or how to take a tissue sample, and also a little bit about of each disease, and you can be complementing with these ones. I will be adding some publications on the grape blog where you can find this information available. Last but not least, grape blog. At the grape blog, and as you heard Jeff, we are publishing and working all together to provide the most accurate information to growers, and all together we are contributing to the grape blog by Perennial. So if you haven't seen, I invite you to take a look with your cell phone with the QR code, take a photo to the blog if you want to take a look, and to consider to sign up. And this is the code to sign up to the blog. So it's plenty of information. We are publishing weekly, more than a couple of times, just to provide the most accurate information at provincial level. So I will be adding also the literature in a while when we are in the Q&A section. So we are in one of the parts that many people enjoy, including myself, which is the growers discussion. So we'll be talking with with Marcel, my apologies. And if you have any question and would you like to include, please use the Q&A section in the Zoom. My apologies. I will answer one question before moving ahead. Will there be hard copies, paper copies available? Where can we purchase a hard copy? Well, we'll not have almost hard copies, Bill, but everything is available online. It's free. It's in PDF, and in a way that if you want to see only one section or you want to print only one section, you can take it in that way. It's quite eco-friendly in this way with diminish, and you can print only the necessary parts. Did our cold winter have an impact on the survival of phylloxera? Very good question, Jeff. I wouldn't be able to answer you. I think the best person to answer that question will be Dr. Deb Moreau. So I hope we can have her in the next session or do something to answer these questions in a proper way. So now we'll stop sharing my screen. We'll turn on some light as well. So Steve, I passed through a couple of things, but I would like to give some priority to the shoot thinning and the tucking, because it's with the conditions, the vines, they have been growing super fast. So will you let us know how is in which part of the process you are in shoot thinning, tucking already, or a combination of everything?
Yeah, we haven't started tucking yet. We actually dropped some wires to get ready for tucking yesterday and today. Shoot thinning, we've covered quite a bit of the vineyard. So we ran through and did a quick suckering around the base and down the trunk, and then we kind of came back to shoot thinning. We tend to prioritize by variety. So young vines so that you don't get them overloaded with shoots and everything. We prioritize. So we've run through a couple pretty big blocks of young Chardonnay for shoot thinning to give those as good a chance as we can. Then we move into the more mature vinifera blocks, and then if we have time, we tend to run through some of the hybrid blocks that are a little too crowded. We like to thin Guys and Heim almost every year. Find it quite advantageous to do that, and kind of go from there. And we'll also identify blocks a little bit for their production. and shoot thin accordingly. So we'll shoot thin a block of Chardonnay that we know for sure is going for still wine a little harder than we would a block of Chardonnay that was going for sparkling, just because we know we want our yield to be down a little bit more and they're going to hang a little bit longer. We'd also much rather shoot thin and set our crop levels by shoot thinning than trying to remove clusters later on. It's way more expensive to remove clusters. If you can do it at the shoot thinning stage and really set your production goals, then it's we find we save quite a bit of money in labor.
Perfect. That is a very nice message, because if you can save, especially now that is everything moving quite fast, and go ahead of the cost, it will be appreciated. Plus, you will be more efficient with the nutrients in your plant.
Yeah, and I mean, then if you go through and deleaf, you really don't want to be deleafing a shoot that probably shouldn't have been there anyway. It's just going to slow down the process, right? So it's not only the fact that it takes longer to find that cluster, count clusters, and take it off later, but it just simplifies kind of everything and opens the plant up a little more for spraying and disease management. So it's tricky. You really have to know your plant, and you want to make sure that all the shoots are viable there. You don't want to be taking stuff off that you want later, but if it's a good, healthy plant, it's really nice, good, consistent shoots, then we'll thin it right down to what we want for production levels.
Perfect. So I will jump a little bit to Jeff Franklin, because, well, you show a lot of photos from the experimental vineyard at AFC. So how are you in the tucking or shoot thinning? How looks everything there?
So we planted our vineyard in 2016. So, and since then we found that no 2 years have been the same for us. Because we do research, sometimes our research prevents us from doing a lot of shoot thinning. Sometimes you want to see the full capacity, the full production of all the vegetation that the vine can put out. But we do some shoot thinning. I agree with Steve. That's a perfectly apt point. If you can thin your crop down to get the spacing between your shoots this time of year, as opposed to going back later and trying to remove clusters, this is the time of year to do it. It's much faster to do it now than to try to do it later. We find varieties like Marquette and Lackady, and sometimes New York Muscat will have a lot of two shoots per node. And situations like that, of course, we're going to want to go in and take the weaker of the two shoots, using the secondary. Our vinifera in some years have needed a little bit of shoot thinning, but of course, usually much less than the hybrids. And again, also the other point that's good, especially after a year like last year, to get that canopy into a narrower space for disease prevention, especially in a year like last year in 2021. That's important. We've learned that lesson in some cases the hard way, by not thinning enough and leaving too much canopy in there, and then having some difficulty later chasing disease around.
Thank you.
In terms of tucking, we haven't. Our Marquette is probably, I would say, by the end of next week we'll begin tucking that. It'll be at that point, and Lackady probably the week after that. So it's not that far away.
Yeah, no, it's moving quite fast. So in that sense, Steve, because I know you have very big acreage of vines, so which varieties are you starting usually with the shoot thinning? Where you have the priority and
yes, so it, like I say, it kind of depends. This year, crazily enough, we started with Chardonnay. So we had some young vines of Chardonnay that were really vigorous. We really wanted to make sure we got through them. And it was also a bit of a slow process, just because we're concentrating on the structure of the vine this year, where they're very young vines. So we were spending a little more time in the renewal zone to make sure we got it right. And I guess that's, I mean, you could see in the videos that there was probably a little more time spent in those spurs and in the renewal zone, making sure you got it right there. Then it's a pretty quick go down the cordon to snap off any extras or secondaries. So yeah, this year we started in Chardonnay, some young Chardonnay. Then we kind of go into the ones, probably a hybrid that's a little further along. So we did Chardonnay, and then we went and did Geisenheim, and then we came back to some older Chardonnay. Then we haven't really spent too much time so far on Frontenac or Lacadie, which is really coming along, but it's just, you really have to prioritize what you're going to do. So we're going to make sure we get the vinifera right, the young vines right, and then if we have time, we'll come back in. And we find with the hybrids, the best way to spend the money on labor on those is just to concentrate on the renewal zone, just to get the center there, make sure it's not too crowded in the center. You give the renewal canes for next year a good chance to grow up through the middle and not be too crowded, and just open up a little bit. A lot of times hybrids, you don't have to do a lot other than snap off secondaries anyway, so it's a little quicker trip through.
Yeah, that is the biggest advantage. You know, you have the luxury of the hybrids that give you more window to work.
Yeah, and I mean, as far as tucking goes, I think we're probably going to start Frontenac Blanc on Monday. We'll bring the wire back up and start tucking on that. It's up there. We're a little worried. Frontenac, you know, if people are out there growing Frontenac, if they have it tends to be kind of stringy and weak and everything at this time of year. We're really hoping with this rain we don't get a big wind, because we're right at that awkward stage now. We're like 2 days away from wanting to bring that wire up, but those shoots are kind of long and thin, so they get wet with the rain tonight. If we get a wind, we know we're going to lose some. So that's another reason with that variety we tend not to shoot thin it too hard, because it always seems like you lose a few to natural thinning just with the wind and rain.
According to your experience and in your vineyard, which is the most difficult variety to tuck and the easiest?
Easiest is probably Geisenheim or Riesling. They just seem to grow straight up. Frontenac just wants to fall down. It's a bit of a pain that way. It's just a kind of a stringy fall down vine. The two that are also really hard to do, we've switched on high wire. So Petite Pearl and New York Muscat, we don't tuck anymore. We've trained them up to the top cordon, to the top wire of the cordon, so they just droop down naturally. Pinot Meunier tends to kind of want to fall back down. It's not a real vertical grower, so we find that little one a little tough. And Chardonnay is a great one. Chardonnay is not quite as easy as Geisenheim, but it's pretty easy. It's pretty well managed. It knows what it's supposed to do.
Before finishing this part of the shoot thinning and everything, we have a question, Steve, and it says, for Lacadie, how many shoots are you leaving per side for a strong plant? How many in the middle? Also, if the head is high above the wire, will you leave shoots that could be 12 inches below the head in order to cut it down in the next year?
Yeah, so that's I can't really give a standard answer. That depends a lot on the health of the vine, of how many shoots. But so if it's a good average vigorous plant, we tend to do a palm width between the shoots, and we try to fill the wire from plant to plant. So pretty typical spacing on hybrids would be 4 feet. So if you're going to a one cane system, your cane's probably the better part of 4 feet, 3.5 feet maybe. If it's a 2 cane system, you're looking at basically two 2-foot canes. We don't overlap them. We just want a full wire with every shoot being a palm width apart would be the ideal for us. Then in the middle, you're actually going to, up on the cordon itself, you're going to take a few extra off at the middle, because you want those renewal cane ones to be opened up and space to grow up, so they're strong, so you have a good cane for next year. And as far as training up a new one, for sure, if you're crown head, if you're doing a crown head system and you've got a big knotty crown head and it's up above the wire, yeah, if you can get a latent bud to come out on the trunk, I would really treasure that. I would make sure I tie it up about this time when that gets to be that kind of 10, 12 inches or whatever, go in there with a tape machine or a little tube tie or something, tie that to the grow rod or the trunk, because that would be a great one to train the trunk back down, or the crown head back down. And also, I mean, you know, if your crown head is high and crowded, you're probably not getting very good sap flow. So yeah, I would definitely try to train a new one up.
Important message. You have to keep in mind all the time the sap flow, so to don't have a very crowded head. And about the distance, Steve, it's right. Just try to use your hand to try to keep that distance between both shoots. So you avoid the overcrowded, you will have a nice distance and a production quite spread. So I have another question on the chat. So please, if you have any questions, write on the Q&A feature. So on the vulnerability of Frontenac and wind right now, are there risks of going through with an air blast sprayer at this time?
No, never seen any damage, any significant damage from an air blast sprayer. It's the prolonged blowing back and forth in the gusty conditions of rain, and I'll say it again too. It's usually the coupling of a rain event along with a wind event. With when they're twice as heavy as they should be, with the rain all over the leaves and everything, and that long stringy vine, and then the wind blowing it back and forth, sometimes they'll tend to break. Lackady will do it a little bit too. It's Lackady seems to want to snap at the nodes fairly easily, especially at this younger stage. So that's something to watch in conditions like this. Just, but it's yeah, I wouldn't worry at all. And the other thing is the benefits of going through with the sprayer far outweigh and risk of a little bit of damage.
Yeah, it's more the weight and the wind going and coming in that will increase. So I will, because the hot topic for me all the time is spraying, but because everything is growing very fast due to these conditions, I'm wondering, how are you doing with the weeds? How's everything at your place? And do you have your cover crop? How's everything for you in that aspect?
Yes, we reseeded 3 or 4 weeks ago, maybe longer than that ago. Yeah, I guess it'd be 4 or 5 weeks ago, and we haven't had a lot of movement in our cover crop in between rows. That's just due to the dry May that we've had and everything. I do see there's a little bit coming up in the spaded rows and the tilled rows, but it's not significant yet. I'm expecting those rows are going to go pop and go green after this rain over the next week here. So we are covering back in from the till every other row is a little behind. Weeds, yeah, the weeds are full on. We don't use herbicide. We do mechanical tillage. We've gone pretty steady with both the grape hoe and the roller hack lately. We've got pretty good control this year where it has been fairly dry. It's been a little easier battle than last year was, where it did stay a little wetter. But yeah, it's the weeds are full on. We always find at this time it's just a nonstop battle, and then as the season goes on, if you can get caught up with it now, if you don't let it get ahead too much at this time, it's a lot easier later on. So yeah, we've been any day we can, we've been going pretty steady with the cultivators.
And Jeff, I will ask you the similar. How's everything with you and managing the weeds?
So we're quite fortunate. The conventional program, we have more tools at our fingertips. So in terms of weed management, we use a pre-emergent herbicide, so we can put that on early. We mainly use that because we have a kind of a horticultural window after we push the brush out, that we can get that herbicide on, and that buys us till probably sometime in July, maybe early August, before we need to go in. And we'll do a combination of mechanical weeding after that, and maybe some glufosinate or a softer product for burn down on the weeds to get us through to harvest. So that gets us down to 2, maybe 3 trips through to control weeds. In terms of growing grass seed, I think Steve raised an interesting point. So anybody like him and like myself who seeded early this year, and then we had the cold temperatures, the freezing temperatures, certainly doesn't kill grass seed, but it does put some proportion of that seed into a dormant state. And so you'll get this sporadic germination going on. And so, and I'm seeing that this year, you'll probably see it'll take a while to get all of the seed to germinate. It will germinate in time. And after events like this, that'll help it along. But repeated bouts of cold temperature after seeding can definitely delay germination in a significant proportion of that seed for the types of cover crops that we are using in this part of the world anyway.
Yeah, it's quite uneven due to all the conditions that you mentioned.
In terms of spraying, we are just looking now. We're just starting to think about our earliest downy mildew sprays because they're, we are that 2 to 3 weeks from flower. So that's the season to begin to start thinking about downy mildew. So tomorrow we'll put on our first applications for that.
And I wanted to ask about the spray applications. Steve, how's everything with you in that sense?
Oh, compared to Jeff, I feel like I'm jumping the gun now. So we've got one downy spray. We used copper on all of Vinifera. Before that, a few days before that was just the other night. Put that on kind of in preparation for this rain event today. We got quite a bit of Chardonnay and stuff that's out to 6 and 8 leaf. So we were pretty worried about letting it go through this event uncovered. 4 or 5 days before that, we went through and we did a sulfur boron iron spray. We like to get 2 applications of boron on before flower. So, and then sulfur just as a bit of a mildew deterrent and also for rhinium mites. Iron, of course, super important in our kind of colder, wetter climate as well to get the plants going quick and give them what they need. So we've been through once with that. We'll probably go back in, depending on how this rain event comes out, we'll probably come back in on the weekend with another cover up and another round of boron and iron.
Yeah, and as you said, we had so much rain now. So if somebody has organic or the end products, and depending the end product, a precipitation with more than 15 to 20 millimeters will wash out. So if you already applied, you will be at the mercy of all the diseases. So it will be necessary to reapply again the products, especially if you are organic. And it wouldn't harm, as Steve is saying, or Jeff, that it's coming the time that downy mildew will start to appear, the conditions that will be ideal. So we encourage that take a look of how's the phenology, how they're growing your vines, and apply something to protect against powdery and downy, but especially downy mildew.
Yeah, I know it's a bit of an oversimplification, but we go by the 10-10-10 rule. So if you have 10 degrees Celsius for 10 hours along with 10 millimeters of rain, it's perfect conditions for a primary infection event for downy mildew. So if we're getting that, so the other day our vineyard supervisor and I were, like we do about 20 times a day, checking the weather forecast, and we saw it coming and we just triggered the copper spray day before yesterday for this event coming up, and just felt we had to do it. We couldn't risk it. So
yeah, and something else to keep in mind, it's good to protect and have the application and the conditions. But if your vines are growing very fast and you have some 15 to 20 centimeters of new tissue in 7 days, all this new tissue doesn't have any protection, any fungicide. So it will be necessary to consider another application to cover and have protection against that diseases.
Yeah, and we really like going with the softer organic kind of cover protection type sprays early on in the season. One of the reasons is a lot of them, copper sulfur, it's a little cheaper than going with a systemic. But also we know we're going to be back in there. Absolutely part of our program is to make sure we get 2 applications of boron and 2 applications of iron on before bloom. So, we're going to be driving through the vineyard spraying anyway. Those products are all compatible. So for sure, we'll put a sulfur in for rhinium mite and protection. One thing to be careful of is Some Minnesota varieties like Frontenac is susceptible to copper. I stay away completely from putting copper on those Frontenac varieties. If you see spray burn in there and you're not quite understanding why it is, that's probably what it is. They don't react very well to copper. And then iron doesn't mix very well with some forms of copper. We got in trouble one year mixing iron with Quava, and we got a pretty bad spray burn. So those are just two things from my experience. I learned the hard way, put out there. Just be careful of those two combinations.
The other combination that it's necessary to keep in mind, if the conditions are very humid with some temperature, if you apply sulfur, you can burn your vines. So when you're applying sulfur, please keep in mind that how are the conditions, because if it's warm and very humid, you can burn as well. Jeff, I have a question for you. It's, what product do you use as pre-emergent weed control?
So for pre-emergent control of weeds, we use Chateau. If you can get that on early enough, you can use it on its own. Usually by the time we put it on, we need to mix a little bit of glyphosate with it to get the weeds that have already emerged, because the pre-emergent herbicides will give you no protection against weeds that are already starting to develop. So there's often a tank mix that goes on, and we've just had really good success with it in that it keeps us from reducing the number of times we have to go through the vineyard, as opposed to just using a straight program of burn down products, some which wouldn't even work this time of year, like glufosinate or Ignite. You've got to wait a little bit later this season to do that. But Roundup will only give you so much coverage, and it won't do anything for what's in the ground and is yet to develop. So this definitely seems to save us some time.
Okay. So just to recap for today, we'd like to appreciate all the presentation from Jeff Wenzel about the cost of production presentation. It was quite interesting, and to show the map and where are located the different professionals from NSDA. Jeff Franklin, as always, giving this nice update of weather conditions, and not only in small areas, trying to go more places and combining with vine phenology. I try to sum up a couple of activities that they are moving right now, and they have some priority because you can get advantage later on the season. For example, the shoot thinning, or keeping in mind the tagging of the vines, or where to identify a disease, insects, or more information. And as well, the part of the tissue sample, because in the next couple of weeks, if we continue with these conditions, bloom will arrive quite early. And already Jeff and Steve mentioned, downy mildew will have the ideal conditions in the next couple of weeks with a lot of humidity and warm temperatures, so keep in mind that. Last but not least, I think one of the most fun parts for me for the interaction that we can get, the discussion, to see again the shoot thinning, the tagging with management, and also the spraying program, because it's crucial at this time of the year. So Steve, if you would like to close with something else.
Just thanks everyone for tuning in. Thanks for all the presenters. Thanks for the committee for helping to put this together. Thanks to Francisco and Perennia for making this platform available. We'll be back and keep trying to get these out in a timely manner as we rush through another season. It's always crazy. You prune and prune and prune all winter long, and then it seems like it's just a blink of an eye and we're just going through the phenological stages, and then it's harvest time. So it's a lot of fun doing this, and I enjoy getting together with these guys and presenting this. So other than that, I think the only other thing to mention is keep an eye on the grape blog. Like Francisco said, a lot of great information, and the Grower's Guide out now. I mean, a lot of great information on that. And if you're not getting the emails from the Grape Growers Association, the weekly updates, there's an update comes out every Friday. If you're not getting that, get an email out to Vanessa at gans.com and get signed up for that update as well. So get all the updates. It's a lot of good information for sure. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.